So welcome everyone to part 2 of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I'm Jeanette Connery. I have a private yoga therapy practice in Northern California where I see clients both in person and virtually. I am passionate about the Yoga Sutras because they've changed my life so much, just studying this wisdom and incorporating it into my life in a way that works for me. And I encourage you to do the same. No two people are ever going to get the same exact takeaway from the Yoga Sutras or any other scripture for that matter. My approach is super open, and I encourage lots of questions, lots of conversation, because not only am I presenting this information to you, but you're also teaching me. Every time we hear someone else's reflections, we have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about ourselves, about nature, about the world around us and the people, and that makes us more connected. So before we dive in, I'm going to do some centering with you. We're just going to put the feet flat on the floor. Take a deep breath. If it's possible, inhale and exhale through your nose. And we are in April at this point, and lots of people are struggling with allergies. So if it's not possible to breathe through your nose for any reason, you can just use your mouth and it's no big deal. But whatever you're doing, feel the way your breath comes in and out of your body. Feel the way your body expands around the breath, the way the breath expands inside you. And then feel your feet on the floor, the earth beneath you, the sky above you, the world around you. This is your location, your very special place in the universe, and you are always exactly where you're meant to be. I'm going to do the Sahana chant that we did at part 1. Before I do, I'll read you the translation so you understand the meaning. And then all you have to do is relax and receive the blessing of the mantra. We have come together as students and teachers to share this learning. Let us be protected and nourished. Let us have the energy and awareness to fulfill this task, and let us enjoy our time together. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, peace on the earth, in the sky, and in the heavens. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navadi Tamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. May all beings be benefited from our study of these teachings. May our self-transformation send ripples of goodwill and unconditional love out into the world for the benefit of all. Okay, so last time I told you about The Secret Power of Yoga by Nishala Joy Devi and the Gateway to Enlightenment, Chapter 1 by Rama Jyoti Vernon. And these are both teachers who my teachers have studied under. I consider them my grand teachers or grandmothers in a way. And Nishala Joy Devi still teaches, and you can find her just by looking her up on the old web, on the old interwebs. And Rama has left her body. She entered Mahasamadhi a few years ago. So there's a second book that Rama wrote. So this first one that I mentioned was all about Samadhi Pada, the chapter we went over last week. And just now realizing I didn't put her second book on this screen, and I'll go ahead and fix that later. But it's a yellow book. It's called Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Gateway to Enlightenment, just like the other one, but it's book 2. And it's much thicker. There's more heft to this book. It's also equally wonderful. And unfortunately, that's the end of Rama's writing on the Yoga Sutras as far as what has been published. I'm sure she wrote more, but we haven't seen a third book from her. Also wanted to point out that the Path of the Yoga Sutras, this orange one with elephant on it, this is a really good book about the Yoga Sutras for beginners. This is actually the first book I ever read about the Yoga Sutras. I had tried starting one of the books by a Swami and just was overwhelmed and confused, and went to this book at the suggestion of a colleague, and it was actually really relatable, a lot easier to understand. It's important to know that the concepts in this book are not presented in the order in which they appear in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. However, there is a really nice flow, and it makes sense. Also, Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth. Today we're going to start talking about ego, and this book is a lot about ego. I learned a lot about ego by reading this book. It touches on lots of other things as well, but that was the biggest takeaway for me personally from this book. He talks about the ego, all the different ways that it plays out in our lives, things for you to pay attention to. And if you want to take a deep dive into what is this thing called ego, I really recommend that book. Also, Ram Dass, another teacher who has left his body, The Living Bhagavad Gita, Paths to God. So this is a book about the Bhagavad Gita, which is another Hindu text, very, very, very important Hindu text. And the reason I'm mentioning it here is because some of the themes that we're going to talk about today are also appearing in this book. There's a lot of overlap with the various teachings, with the various scriptures. And I'll be sure to mention later how that fits in. But the thing that I want to highlight about this book in the context of studying the Yoga Sutras today is that Ram Dass has this wonderful chapter on karma. He has a lot of background information, and he's talked to a lot of teachers and done a lot of research. I mean, he was a highly intellectual person, did a lot of research. And he kind of compiled everything that he ever learned into this chapter. I don't know if it's everything he ever learned, certainly. It would probably be a much longer chapter if that was the case. But anyhow, really detailed, and it gets you thinking about karma. There's also a chapter in there about like, what is God, right? And some other really cool, important things in that book. Even if you're not super necessarily into the Bhagavad Gita itself, lots of good stuff in there. All right, so just a review. Last time we talked about just the context of the Yoga Sutras themselves, the fact that they were compiled by a person sort of later in history who saw a need to bring all the information throughout all the ancient Indian teachings about yoga into one resource, into one scripture or teaching or text. And so the chapters of this text are the Samadhi Pada, the Sadhana Pada, Vibhuti Pada, and Kaivalya Pada. So last time we went over Samadhi Pada, which describes the qualities of samadhi, the state of oneness between the individual and the object on which they're meditating. It outlines the subtle aspects of yoga, therefore is usually taught to students who've already reached a certain level of skill with this practice. And I talked about why I decided to actually just go straight through from the first chapter on. I think that, first of all, Patanjali wrote it this way for a reason. Second, it's presumptuous of any teacher to assume that their students are or are not ready for one teaching or another. So this chapter gives us a lot of the background information of the why of yoga and exactly what you're trying to do, which is very useful once you start getting into the 8 limbs of yoga and actually doing the practices. In the Sadhana Pada, Patanjali also describes the causes of human suffering and outlines the first 5 of 8 limbs of yoga. In the Sadhana Pada, that's the second one. Vibhuti Pada, the third, there's description of the final 3 limbs of yoga and special powers that are possible through the practice of yoga. And then in the Kavaliya Padas, mostly a summary of the previous 3 chapters. It goes out into further detail into the workings of karma and the gunas, as well as further describing the siddhis, the special powers. So what is yoga? You'll remember from the first time, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is to still or quiet the waves of the mind, which are stormy indeed. And according to Nishala, her translation, which we know is always going to be a lot more heart-centered, a lot more intuitive, less left brain, more right brain. Yoga is the uniting of consciousness in the heart. And I just think that's so significant. It's a really, it's just a beautiful way of looking at it. Okay, we talked about the vrittis. So we are trying to stop the waves of the mind, and those are the vrittis. And these are correct perception, incorrect perception, imagination, sleep, and memory. And now if you're watching this video without having watched the first, I really recommend you go back and watch the first so you get a really thorough background on what these all are and the implications and the subtleties of all of them. Quick question. Have you noticed the vrittis playing out in your life over the last 2 weeks? Robin?
Well, I've been doing a lot of yoga nidra, and it's been interesting going into it, knowing or understanding more about how the vrittis weave into each other and how the nidra is kind of this combination of sleep and imagination. And I feel like it kind of dropped me into a deeper experience.
Wow. I'm excited for you.
It's been an interesting couple of days. So
yeah, so we know if you're in yoga nidra, this can be a hard part for some people, especially people who are chronically under rested, not to go into a deep sleep. And we know we're in a deep sleep if we stop having vrittis. The vrittis completely stop in the deep sleep. The consciousness itself actually goes away somewhere. It's like a miniature, they call it like the practice for death, actually, letting yourself slip off into this deep sleep. And so you can imagine the implications for those of us who have insomnia and what that could be translated as. But in yoga, if you are experiencing kind of like this dreamlike state, things might not actually make sense as they're coming up in your mind. Sometimes I get auditory hallucinations, and they seem to kind of be random words or phrases. That's how you know you're in nidra and not deep sleep. You can still kind of sense, even though you might not necessarily be aware of what the person who's leading you through is saying, there's still that kind of movement. There's still some vrittis going on.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like imagination, because imagination is like pulling things from different parts of the brain, different parts of the consciousness to make something new. And even memory, and you can see that memory and imagination have a lot to do with each other, because every time we conjure a memory, we have to create something that's not present in the moment. So imagination has to be involved with that. And So, I mean, I could just keep going on and on about the different ways that these vrittis play out with each other. So we're trying to stop the vrittis. And I had a question this week about, well, if you stop the vrittis, like, how are you supposed to even function in life if there are no thoughts in your head? Like, and my answer to that is, good question. Obviously, we need them. And as householders, as people in the world making a living, supporting other people, we do need to think a lot more than, say, someone who lives in a temple or an ashram might, if they are able to dedicate their entire life to meditation. But I think it's about having as few vrittis as possible when you're using vrittis, and then being able to stop them when you want them to stop. So being in control of your mind. And this is a theme that's really prevalent in Buddhism, like being the master of your mind, not letting your mind run your life. So being able to choose when to shut those off. Okay, so Patanjali doesn't actually get into the Eightfold Path or the Eight Limbs of Yoga until almost at least halfway through the Sadhanapada, the chapter on practice. He gives more background and preparatory information that he wants us to understand before we even start. But I'm going to give you this overview of the Eightfold Path before we jump in, because it's going to give you some context for the next couple of slides. So the Ashtanga Yoga has 8 limbs, the 8 limbs of yoga most of us have heard of. Yamas and niyamas, these are the ethics, the attitudes, and that includes Kriya Yoga. So I know that you're not going to understand right now what that is. We're going to talk about that on the next slide. Asana, pranayama, and pratyahara are practices that you do to bring about transformation that will prepare you for the contemplative practices. So these are seen as ways that you can bring up anything that's unresolved and become a master at moving through your karma, moving through your samskara, in order to have nothing beneath the surface that's going to disturb the clarity in your mind. And then we have the contemplative states, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Dharana is considered to be like concentration. So this is where many people spend most of their meditative practice, especially as householders, just the ability to develop concentration, just to train the mind to be able to slow down or even stop. Dhyana is more like contemplation, and samadhi is, as we talked about in the Samadhipada, the union of the person with the infinite, the individual with the infinite. Okay, so Kriya Yoga. I have down here a little map of the yamas and niyamas. These are the first 2 parts of the Eightfold Path. And they are the ethics. And you can see down here, this is where Kriya Yoga is in the yamas and niyamas. But Patanjali is bringing them up before he even shows us the Eightfold Path. So that tells us it's really important. And my teacher, Robin Guth, from the Stress Management Center of Marin, frames Kriya Yoga as prerequisites for doing yoga at all. In other words, if you don't have these things, you will not get very far in yoga. Also, they're important concepts from the Bhagavad Gita and other teachings in ancient India and Hinduism. The 3 yogas. Tapas, the self-discipline or self-purification, is, refers to the fire, specifically the fire of self-purification. at the most basic level, tapas appears as the discipline required to get yourself to your yoga practice or anything else you've decided to do for your growth and development every day. There are days that you'd rather sleep or skip it, but you do it anyway because you're using tapas. If you've ever quit an addiction, left a codependent relationship, or attempted to skip a habit, shift a habit, then you understand the metaphor of fire. In the moments when it's extremely uncomfortable or painful, that discomfort itself is what's clearing the unhelpful energy and facilitating you re-emerging lighter and freer. You've literally burned away the impurity, or at least part of it. So this is in correlation with karma yoga, as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. Karma yoga. So both of these are considered the yoga of doing. Svadhyaya, self-reflection and meditation, is literally one's own meditation, as it's translated from Sanskrit, one's own meditation. Though this term has also been translated as self-study, self-reflection, and scripture study, since the scriptures are thought to be a reflection of yourself and kind of a roadmap to understanding yourself. We're called to be honest and objective in our self-reflection. And it's also important to remember to be loving and compassionate. So for those of us who tend to be really hard on ourselves, it's way too easy to be like, oh, this is wrong with me and that's wrong with me and I do this wrong and I do that wrong. But that's really not going to get you anywhere. You have some energy of constriction around that, even if it doesn't feel like it, even if you're saying, well, oh, I'm just being honest. Well, you know, let's reframe it. I mean, how would you say that to someone you love? You wouldn't just come down on them pointing your finger. You're doing this wrong. You know, aha, I see that there's room for improvement in this area for me. And yes, thank you for showing that to me. I'm glad that I now have an opportunity to address that, however painful it may be, right? And it can be really painful to realize some of the things that we've done that hurt other people or even ourselves. Some of the waking up involves realizing just how blind we've been. That's part of it, you know, but remember to be kind, be gentle, be a gentle, loving master of your mind. Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to a higher power. Here's a hint, you are the higher power. Mostly people translate this as surrender and devotion to God. They do use the word God in the Hindu religion, and it is a monotheistic religion, despite the presence of lots of deities. However, their concept of God is different from that of Christianity, and we won't go into huge detail about that for now. But just to say that at the end of the day, creator and creation are one and the same. But I often say power beyond yourself. This phrase literally means, like translated from Sanskrit, means to fill with wishes and bring forth wealth. So I think of that as, well, where do you put your wishes and where does your wealth come from, right? So this is actually the second time Patanjali is mentioning Ishvara Pranidhana. In the Samadhi Pada, he instructs us on the same matter. So by the time we get to the Eightfold Path, it's the third time he's mentioned devotion to a power beyond yourself. So that tells us this is really, really, really important. Supremely important on the path of yoga. So in the Samadhi Pada, I'm going to read to you from Rama's book, just her translations of a couple of the sutras. It says, Samadhi is attained from special devotion and dedication to Ishvara. or surrender to Ishvara. She says, the next one. So that was Sutra 1.23. 1.24 is Ishvara is a particular energy unaffected by affliction, deed, result of action, or the latent impressions thereof. In other words, Ishvara doesn't have vrittis, doesn't have the kleshas, samskaras, vasanas, like we're going to learn what those things are in the next couple slides, doesn't have any of these afflictions that we have. So that tells us Ishvara is the wholeness from which we come, not anything separated from that at all, not even a little bit. The origin of all things, the source of all things, and all things in itself. 1.25 says, in Ishvara, the seed of omniscience has reached its utmost development, which cannot be exceeded. Okay, so Ishvara is everywhere and knows everything. Ishvara is, this is 1.26, Ishvara is the teacher of even the most ancients. This teacher of former teachers is unlimited and unconditioned by time. Omniscient and omnipotent, okay? So not only is it everywhere and everything, but it can do anything, and it's conscious. It's a conscious, but not necessarily a being. Or is it a being? That's more of a deeper philosophical question for another day. But the name of Ishvara is the mystic symbol Om. I think that's enough for now. Okay, so we learned a lot about Ishvara in chapter 1, and I chose to wait until now to bring it up, first of all, because we had a lot of stuff to cover in the first video, but also this is big, and it comes up again. So I thought, well, I'll just bring it up when it comes up again. So Ishvara, if you want, you can assign that as a name for God, but it's also the vibration of Om. So why is it so important to surrender to a higher power? I think Ishvara Pranidhana is pointing us to place all our intentions in the higher power and assuring us that if we do so, the treasures we seek will manifest, hence the Sanskrit meaning to fill with wishes and bring forth wealth. But this can be hard in a culture of religious skepticism, right? A lot of us don't want to surrender to anything because it's scary, and there are folks out there who would seek to take advantage of something like that. So this is a really personal thing, and it's why I've chosen to do it mostly in the context of my own practices and meditations, and I'm starting to branch out with sharing that with other people. This can be what I've found is giving over the self with a little s is an act of claiming the power of the self with a big S. Ishvara Pranidhana is related to the area of Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of devotion as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. So I kind of skipped Svadhyaya here. So we have Tapas, which is Karma Yoga, Svadhyaya, which is Jnana Yoga, the yoga of wisdom and study and intellectualism, Ishvara Pranidhana, the yoga of devotion. Through devotion to a divine being or principle, we shift our vibrational frequency to that of the object of devotion. Bhakti, devotion, practices help us cultivate joy, happiness, bliss, love, gratitude, and selfless giving. Nishtala's interpretation of Patanjali's Kriya Yoga reads, Kriya Yoga, or yoga in action, embraces tapas, igniting the purifying flame, svadhyaya, sacred study of divine through scripture, nature, and introspection. Ishwara Pranidhana, wholehearted dedication to the divine light in all. Thank you, Nishala, for redirecting us again and again to that which is most important. Not only the divine light, but the idea that the divine light is in all, everywhere, in everything you see, every person, every situation, creature, plant, and object. That's what we're trying to devote ourselves to. And then one last quote from Rama. To practice Ishvara Pranidhana, we develop a longing for that universal consciousness. Our desire to return to the source would become so strong that all we can think about is the beloved Ishvara. Whatever we think about is what we manifest. And so the more we think about our divine source, the closer we come to that universal communion. It's big. In yoga, if you start to study a lot of teachings, and especially people who have been with gurus or even the gurus themselves, you'll notice there is this idea of longing for the guru, longing for God, longing. You see it again and again, and that's the idea behind it. We're trying to transform any desire that we might have for any material or worldly thing over to that, and choosing to make that the number one most important thing. Okay, so this slide is all about the comparison I was already doing between the ideas here with Kriya Yoga and the ideas of the 3 yogas of the Bhagavad Gita. So it's important to know that among the 3 paths of yoga, each is valid and powerful, just as the others. But this means the pursuit of yoga can be suited to the individual, their personality, and their current inclinations, right? So yoga is flexible. You can choose which path suits you. And you may find that you do more than one of these at a time. You know, you may do karma yoga during the day and then study your sutras at night, or do your bhakti on the weekends when you go to kirtan. So you don't have to just devote yourself to one if you don't want to. You may also find that your focus shifts among these as life flows through you, right? Depending on what phase you're in. I did spend a lot of time on jnana yoga and then discovered bhakti. Just really started doing it for me. So, you know, you can change. You don't have to stick to only one for your whole life. Bhakti is considered to be the origin of the other forms of yoga, since any pursuit in yoga is carried out in order to become closer to the divine, or your oneness, or your true nature. So with that in mind, we see that all the other yogas flow from bhakti. After all, what is the aim of yoga? To reunite with the source, which is what bhakti is all about. Okay, so I mentioned kleshas before. The kleshas are mind waves. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm going so fast. I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions or make comments about the 3 yogas, Kriya Yoga, Karma, Jnana, Bhakti. Is there anything that you wanted to say or ask?
Thanks for asking. Not at this time. You're right, it's a lot. It's so interesting, and there's so much to peel back in everything, in every little bit of information that you share. I'm just kind of trying to soak it all up right now, and I'll go back afterwards and, you know, re-immerse myself. And then I'll probably come up with some questions.
Okay, yeah, definitely. You can always email me the questions later too, and we can chat about it, or I can even address them in the next video.
Okay,
because I'm
sounds
sure other
great.
people are going to be curious about what everybody else is thinking. So yes, it is a lot, and what I want to communicate is that I've spent 7 years absorbing this information. So I don't in any way expect anyone to, just watch these videos and be like, that's it, I get the Yoga Sutras. This is something to get you started, to get your mind going. And if you're really not sure what to do with this amount of info, what I would recommend is just whichever thing that really pops out at you, spend some time with that, you know. You can meditate on it. You can look up those concepts and other people's interpretations and discussions on them to get more perspective. You can talk about them with other yogis until you feel like you've embodied them, or at least partially embodied them. The way we express, or the way the Yoga Sutras express themselves through us, changes over time too. It's like every time I come back to these, there's something different that I see, because there's something, my life is different, right? Journaling is a great way to go too, to kind of work through your thoughts. All right, so now we'll talk about the kleshas. The kleshas are mind waves just like the vrittis, but unlike the vrittis, the kleshas are always painful. They're an outgrowth of our samskara, which are thought patterns and impressions that influence our thoughts, speech, and behavior. So we accumulate the samskara in this life and previous lives as well, and they create these kleshas. The kleshas are often referred to as the veils that blind us or separate us from the truth. And to shift these deeply held patterns is referred to as thinning the veils. So avidya, really not seeing, or forgetfulness. I've heard people translate this as ignorance. I really prefer to use words that are more positive, just because of my own experience reading things like that. I don't ever want a religious teaching or teacher to make me feel like I'm not good enough, right? And I don't want anyone to ever have that experience when they come into contact with spirituality. So, of course, if we go past the innuendo behind that word, especially in our culture, what we see is that it just means not knowing or not seeing. A lot of people say forgetfulness because, at one time we knew what we were, but somehow we lost touch with that. Initiala says it's innocence of our divine nature. Specifically, we're talking about not really seeing that we actually are one with God and one with everyone around us, that we are just a wave on the ocean. I am not really an individual. I look like an individual. I feel like an individual for now, but eventually I will leave this body. And then, the illusion won't be as strong of thinking that I'm an individual. Egoism, asmita. Nishala calls it undue trust in the individual self. There's a lot of discussion in the Yoga Sutras about, being confused, thinking that this individuated self is the most important, or, is what you really are, or just attaching a lot of value to this. So we're kind of being aimed at reassessing where we attach our value. Of course, every person is valuable, but here's like some dualities that exist in nature, right? Every individual is important, but at the same time, that's, when we zoom out, not maybe as strong of a truth as we think it is. I don't know if that's actually what I'm trying to say. It's complex. It's subtle. We kind of have this obsession with I, me, thinking that this I is like the most important thing. And the way our cultures have been developing in this age of chaos, the Kali Yuga, that has gotten a lot deeper. So this is actually a very deep klesha for a lot of us, most of us. Okay, so raga, attachment, mostly is called attachment. Nishala says excessive fondness of fleeting pleasures, which we can take from her words that yes, we can have fondness for pleasure. That's not really the point. It's excessive fondness, or what happens when that pleasure is gone, right? That we should have our awareness open, and as pleasure comes in, see it, experience it. Oh, yes, this is pleasure. Oh, I like pleasure. And then when it's gone, okay, that was nice. What's next? Right? Rather than thinking, oh, how do I make this last? See, we sabotage our own joy when we do that. We're so preoccupied with making that moment last that we don't enjoy it as much as we could. And then there's also craving when it's not present, or sadness when it's gone. Dvesha, aversion, pushing away. Nishala says excessive avoidance of unpleasant experiences. Again, yes, we can do our best to avoid unpleasant experiences, but they're inevitable. And what do we do when they appear? Pushing things away. So it's not helpful. That's how we end up repressing emotions, avoiding situations, and it's how we avoid resolving our samskara. So abhinivesha, the fear of death or clinging to the body, like we have so much obsession over our bodies, how they should look. We have obsession over health, even like if I don't have perfect health, and how can I even enjoy my life? There's nothing left. Maybe that might not be true. Let's kind of unpack that and challenging you to reconsider. And this is a really important part of dealing with chronic pain. Okay, can I accept that my body isn't the way I want it to be, and still find ways to make meaning here in my life? And Nishala says it's elusive awareness of our immortality. Yeah, we kind of assume that we're never going to die. We don't really want to think about death. And then once it's come, we're terrified. We try our best not to die. Or we don't talk about death. We hide death. We don't show people dead bodies. We don't, in a lot of cultures, it's actually totally normal for people, including children, to see their dead relatives and ceremonies and rituals as they celebrate the life and assist that person in passing on. We don't do that. Just one example of the ways that abhinivesha manifests, and this is said to be the very last one that goes, the hardest klesha of all to obliterate, and the last one to go. So all of these kleshas have the energy of contraction, constriction, tightness, clinging on or pushing away. And in the yoga and what we're trying to do, we're trying to be expansive. We're trying to let go, open the hand and let the sand slide through the fingers. You can catch more with an open hand than you can a closed fist. And all four of these down here are said to flow from avidya. So avidya is like the mother of the kleshas, not knowing or not remembering who we really are, what we really are, leads to all the other ones. But they also kind of go around and around. Here's the wheel of the kleshas. This is an idea I took from Rama's book. She has a wheel of the kleshas. It looks a little different, but the words are in the same place. We have avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. And it just keeps going around and around and around in circles. And we kind of get trapped in this downward spiral. How do we break this pattern? So, food for thought. If you're avoiding raga, dvesha, if you're, oh, okay, sorry, I couldn't even understand my own idea for a second there. If we're trying not to have clinging and aversion, what does that mean if you have likes, dislikes, and preferences? Any thoughts?
Sorry, I couldn't find the button. I think, I'm not sure. It seems like to me almost something like letting your likes, dislikes flow through you and trying not to hang judgment on them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Like, if I really want to go see a certain movie with my friends, we're all having a conversation about what movie to see, right? It's funny, I was actually reading a book by someone who had previously lived in a Buddhist monastery, and when he came back, oh, it was Jack Kornfield. He came back and was gonna go to a movie with a girl, and she was asking him, what movie do you want to see? And he's like, oh, I have no preferences. I don't care.
Uh-huh.
And she got really frustrated because what she really wanted was for him to say, well, I want to see this. What do you want to see? And then have a conversation about it. And it's possible they might have even wanted to see the same movie. And in retrospect, he was saying, actually, it doesn't mean that you don't have preferences at all. What the turning point is what do you do when you don't get the thing that you prefer, right? So if I'm going to go to a movie with my friends and there's a certain one I want to see, but they all want to see a different one, it's okay for me to have that preference and to say, this is my preference. But if 4 of them want to see the other movie and only one of me wants to see the one I want to see, I just have to accept, look, maybe I can go see that movie another time and still enjoy myself having a movie with my friends. Super, super, super basic, like really basic example, but I think it's effective. We're not meant to have 0 preferences and be these like, you know, completely passive participants in life. In fact, our desires are something for us to work with. And that's what I also wanted to bring up is that like there's this idea you'll see again and again of like, we need to eliminate all of our desires. Desire is the birthplace of, well, I don't like some of the words that I've heard. Desire is the birthplace of sin. Desire is the birthplace of separation. Their desires are what damns you. No, it's the attachment to the desire. We can actually use our desires towards our enlightenment if we're skillful and really mindful about it. Okay, so let's talk about samskara and vasana. Vasana, I've heard it both ways. So the samskara are deep psychic impressions that lay hidden in the subconscious mind, right? So here's your mind, here's what you're aware of, and then here's what's in the subconscious. This is where samskara and your vasana live. Samskara probably over here, vasana are down here. So the samskara can vary in depth, size, and density, and they can also be from this life or another life. Overall, samskara are the karma that we're working through in this lifetime. Vasana are even deeper, larger patterns that travel with us from lifetime to lifetime and can take many lifetimes to come to the surface to be seen and resolved. They're like the boulders at the bottom of the river, and the samskara are the pebbles. So though they remain unseen, they can still influence our thoughts, words, and actions, and therefore our karma, because every time we think, speak, or act, we're creating karma. So yeah, this can get bigger. The part that you're aware of, right? Maybe if we want to continue with this metaphor, we can think of bringing the water level down, right? And that's what yoga is all about. Making seen the unseen, making conscious the unconscious, bringing light to the dark places. So as we're processing trauma, for example, we'll have some samskara, impressions that arise from previous experiences. And what we have to try to do is remain open. Remember, we don't want to do any of the kleshas. We don't want to create new karma and deepen them or repress them. And it's scary. So it's best to start slowly with smaller traumas first. But lots of examples. I see us kind of running thin on time. I'm going to just go ahead and get through the next couple slides because it'll kind of tie all of this stuff together. So karma, I mentioned Ram Dass's book, Paths to God, has an amazing chapter on karma. And according to Rama's understanding, you literally are your karma, spiritually, energetically, and physically. The energy of your karma makes up the individual manifestation that is you in this world. Oops, sorry. Where's my, why can't I get my over to the, oh gosh. Come on. Okay. So your karma is your body, your thoughts, where you were born, your parents, etc. And Rama says again and again that the body is crystallized mind. Isn't that an interesting idea? We have this mind and we have this idea, this like karma, this packet, this energy packet of causes and effects, causes that create this body. So that just drives home the whole oneness of body and mind in a whole new way. So karma is the law of cause and effect. It applies to thoughts, words, and actions. And the effects of karma are nature seeking balance, not punishment. It's not punishment. It's about balance. And it's about dissolving what's there. I mean, at the end of the day, at the end of your cycle, when you finally escape the cycle of birth and death, what you've done is resolved all your karmas, dissolved all of them by allowing the samskara and the vasana to come up without creating new vrittis and new kleshas. Karma can be personal or collective. Yeah. The objective of enlightenment involves resolving or dissolving your karma. Already said that. Okay. So my take on karma, like there are a lot of people out there who do these past life regressions and they always, they want to know what their karma is. Like They want to be able to explain everything. But I think that's kind of missing the point. We should do our best to gracefully, this is just my opinion, we should do our best to gracefully deal with whatever comes up for us and give thanks for the moments of good fortune and assistance. So this goes both ways. Like, we could always be asking, why do I have such bad karma? Why did I get cancer at the age of 20, right? Why did I, which I didn't, but I know somebody who did. Why, on the other hand, we could say, well, why did those people over there have to be starving in that nation? It's way too easy, and it's really dangerous to go down the road of trying to explain, well, they must have bad karma, right? It kind of takes away their humanity. So we give thanks for the good karma, for the assistance, for the good fortune, for that little bit of extra help we get from the other side, and pray for those who need it. So we can't just dismiss people by saying, oh, well, they have bad karma. Okay. Oh, yes. The womb of karma. Kleshas are the womb of the karma. The womb of karma, sheathed by the kleshas, gives birth to experiences now and in the future. As long as the veils encase the womb of karma, the actions will be affected. Karma bears fruits according to the type and quality of the seed planted and the care given to its growth. The yoga, we do yoga to resume our oneness with divine and negate all patterns that keep us in the illusion of separateness. The end result is the cessation of the cycle of birth and death. And as long as the kleshas are active, we cannot dissolve our samskara, vasana, and karma. So here we have an example of this tree. The vasana are down here, the samskara are here. It's going to take a lot longer. Let's say this is water, maybe. It's going to take a lot longer for water at this level to get up to those roots than it will at this level, right? This tree is like your body. This is where your karma, your samskara and vasana meet the outside world and create this body. And the branches are where your karma meets the outside world and interacts with it to create your unique personality. Just as no two trees have the exact same branching pattern. Eventually, fruit will come down and fall to the earth, leaving its seeds, and more karmas will grow. We're trying to stop that process of creating new karma. So this is the wheel of karma. Each of these terms has a Sanskrit term, but I chose not to use them here to make it easier to understand. This is also taken from Rama's book. We have experience. So you have an experience. It creates an impression, right? The impression goes down into your subconscious and becomes a subtle impression, something you might not even be aware of. Then the subtle impressions arise eventually and create thoughts. The thoughts create desires. The desires create actions. Actions, as a result of the actions, we have experiences which create new impressions. We go around and around. So we're trying to stop this cycle. So if we have an experience, let's say, that's maybe disturbing, this is our chance to say, I'm not going to let this get me going. I'm not going to let this make impressions. I'm not going to form new karma in this moment. And when we do that, that's when we're dissolving. Because remember, this experience is a result of our subtle impressions coming to the surface to be seen and dealt with. So that's where you get to break it. You could also break it here or here or here, depending on how mindful you are, right? Sometimes we can actually identify a thought as it's forming, as that subtle impression is coming up. Aha, I noticed that pattern. Hey, mind, I see what you're doing. Stop it. We're not going to do that anymore. Okay. This quote has been attributed to lots of different people. So I just chose to say, we don't know who said it. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Okay. So in Yoga Sutra, these 3 sutras, by the way, I have looked up a lot of different translations and come up with my own way of presenting them based on what I feel is most efficient use of words and accurate to the real meaning. The wise, you'll hear the word discriminating a lot, just meaning that we can discriminate between what's real and unreal rather than discriminating against people. The wise understand that attachment to worldly objects results in suffering due to fear, anxiety, and reinforcement of samskara because of the nature of the world is change. The only pain that can be avoided is the pain yet to come. The avoidable pain is caused by the union of the seer and the seen. That's pretty much what Patanjali is saying, but what it means is that you're identifying with the physical world. Good grief, I can't get my... I really need to... there we go. Okay. If the nature of the world is to always change, you can see how being attached to anything in it would eventually cause disappointment. For everything we depend on for gratification will eventually disappear. This is true about material things, status, traditions, nations, nationality, pets, and even people. There have always been those who lament that the world is not how it used to be in one way or another. And we can see this tension playing out on a grand scale in American politics right now, and what's happening and what it's doing to us as a community. There's a lot of fear out there about the ways our culture is changing and the perceived implications of that change on both sides. So many translations of this sutra don't have the word attachment, but have Patanjali telling us that the world is pain, all of it. It's translated as the world is pain. What does that mean? I just think he's pointing to the fact that pain is inevitable, especially if you're attached to the things in the world. So in this one, the only pain that can be avoided is the pain in the future. It sounds pretty optimistic, but also unrealistic. It's my opinion that avoiding pain in this lifetime is not only futile, but in direct opposition to the practice of yoga. Remember, dvesha, aversion, is a klesha, which will reinforce our samskara and create more karma. In that way, this sutra seems to be in direct contrast to the one before it. The objective is not to extricate yourself from pain, but to accept the experience of pain, discomfort, disappointment, without allowing it to create new samskara. And I want to read to you from Nishala's book, 146. So this is this whole section according to Nishala. And by the way, this is a section all about jnana yoga according to Nishala. Like this is all about intellectualizing, seeing it, knowing it, being able to identify with your mind, using your mind to transform your mind through understanding. So, intuitive wisdom empowers us to expand beyond the constantly changing natural world to the abode of the divine spirit. With this understanding, once vital difficulties become impotent. The source of these difficulties is the inability to recognize the divine spirit as omniscient and therefore separate from the constantly changing natural world. That's big. When understood as illusory, nature and her attributes, the gunas, exist to nature exists to serve the divine self with both enjoyment and liberation. Enjoyment and liberation. Those go together. Ooh, I like that. These attributes of nature, the gunas, which we're going to talk about, are both tangible and intangible. The divine self observes the world without being affected by it. The natural world exists for the benefit of the divine self. With the realization of the divine self, the illusory natural world becomes transparent, though still seemingly very real to those enmeshed in it. When the divine self and nature unite, this dynamic and powerful synergy creates the illusory world, obscuring the vision of spirit. So it's like we're allowing our divine selves to become enmeshed in something that's going to keep us from understanding who we really are. Keep us from actually seeing ourselves as we are. Okay. This union is consummated when we forget the divine self. With constant remembrance of the divine self, no such union is possible. Established in the grace of intuitive wisdom, we experience liberation. Liberation is recognized in 7 ways. When we no longer feel the need for knowledge, to stay away from anything or anyone, to gather material things, or to act. Our constant companions are joy, faith, and clarity. Okay. So here comes Purusha and Prakriti. So this is a fundamental way of understanding the universe and the nature of the universe. We have the source of creation, which is genderless, timeless, formless. Okay. You could say this is God or Ishvara or divine holy one, divinity itself, the universe, unified consciousness, all of those things. And from that, I mean, the beginning of the physical universe is always with splitting from the oneness, right? So the initial split is into Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha has these qualities. Prakriti has these qualities. So next, Patanjali shares with us that the source of suffering is in Purusha and Prakriti become so enmeshed that oneness is perceived. So here in material form and nature around us in the physical world, this is the Prakriti. We think that these two are like the same because we can't see that this isn't all there is. It's almost like we're assigning, we're assigning too much value to the one thing. Many translations call this union, which can be confusing because the word yoga means union. So aren't we aiming for union and oneness with the physical with the spiritual, but not in this case. We're trying to merge feminine and masculine. We're not trying to merge feminine and masculine. We're trying to transcend it. After all, even Purusha and Prakriti are dualities, born of separation from divine oneness. They are also an illusion. And then we have the gunas. The gunas are the energies behind every subatomic particle manifest in the universe, the cause of the entire phenomenal world. They arise in infinite combinations and are always changing, which is why the physical world is always changing. because they are associated with the material, they are part of Prakriti. The Yoga Sutras instruct us to separate ourselves from the pull or the influence of the gunas, which means we are retreating into Purusha, the non-manifest. When the gunas are in perfect balance, vrittis don't arise. So there's the gunas outside of you in the world around you, but there's also gunas inside you, in your mind, in your body. We're trying to get that internal environment to be so balanced that the gunas do not arise. Basic principles of working with the gunas. Here's the first. Like attracts like. So let's say I'm in Rajas, right? Rajas in personality terms is going to be anger, it's going to be adrenaline, it's going to be active body, right? Active mind. The mind just can't stop moving. We've all experienced that. So more movement is going to create more movement, more heat, activity, change. Likewise, if I'm stuck in tamas, this is associated with like depression, sluggishness, heavy feeling of heaviness, lack of motivation. The longer I sit around like a slug, the deeper I'm going to get into that hole. Like attracts like. If I'm trying to get to sattva, I can try thinking of sattvic things, right? And sattva is considered to be the balancing point between these two. So sattvic things would be light, illumination, balance. I can think of something that uplifts me. I can think of being in nature. I could even go sit under a tree. That would be a pretty sattvic thing to do. The other principle is opposites balance. And this is so basic, it's going to seem so obvious. If I'm in Rajas, I'm going to need to bring some tamas in to balance me out. If I'm in tamas, like if I'm super depressed and I can't even get my butt out of bed, I need somehow to light a fire under my ass, right? I need some Rajas. And the interesting thing about moving from tamas to Rajas, moving from tamas to sattva, if we're trying to always get to sattva, to perfect balance, like Rajas could move right into sattva, but tamas can't. Tamas has to go through Rajas first to get there. It's pretty interesting. But if anybody out there has ever been really depressed or really sad, you get mad before you feel better, right? Maybe you leave an abusive relationship and you're really, really sad. And then all of a sudden, one day you get angry. You're like, how did I let this person abuse me this way? How could that person do this stuff to me? And you get really angry. And then eventually you're able to calm down and come back to here. So we want to try to be here as much as we can. And it can be hard to stay here. And a lot of the time we kind of swing through it between. Or maybe it looks more like this. It's good to observe this as it's happening, just to be familiar with the ways that you move through the gunas and the gunas move through you. So we're trying to get the gunas to stop having such a pull on us. So the study of the scriptures, of yourself, of nature, is known as jnana yoga, wisdom yoga. Nishala phrases it as the development of intuitive wisdom because teaching us about the nature of the universe, how Prakriti and Purusha relate to each other, and how to view the gunas, Patanjali is leading us into Jnana Yoga. Though Jnana Yoga is an intellectual path, eventually it dissolves away from intellectual understanding and into intuitive knowing and even unknowing. We study and study until we conclude that we know nothing at all. So that passage I read from Nishala Joy Devi about Jnana Yoga is addressing everything from Sutra 15 through 27 in this chapter. And then Patanjali is going to start telling us about the Eightfold Path. So he's told us about Kriya Yoga. He's told us about Jnana Yoga. And he's told us about Bhakti Yoga. And he's told us basically the universe in a nutshell and how it works, especially in relation to your mind, your consciousness, and the right understanding to have as you go about trying to extricate yourself from the suffering. Remember, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And this eightfold path is what we're going to conquer. We're going to endeavor to understand in the third and final session of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So Robin, is there any question that you have or comment before we wrap it up?
So this is all, it's so interesting. It's a little hard for me to put it outside of what's happening to me with my own direct experience right now. It just feels really applicable to how I've been experiencing yoga already. And feels like something I want to know more about, a really great guide. I feel like as you went through the material today, like I've been doing a lot of trauma processing. And so I think I've been experiencing Ishvara, and definitely like it might be just kind of like confronting of kleshas. I feel like I've been literally walking through emotions, like letting them come into me and feeling them without avoiding them for the first time in maybe, I don't know, my life, or since I was really, really small. Things like joy and fear, like seriously just going like right through the fear to the other side, and staying conscious for it, and then experiencing like this opening and this releasing that comes with that. And with that releasing is coming this giant release of muscular tension and what feels like long held body trauma. It's crazy. So that's kind of where this is in for me today.
Cool.
And
thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Keep going if you have some more to say.
Yeah, it's heavy, but it's amazing. Like, I totally get that. It's like, it's painful, but it's cauterization of a wound. That's what it feels like to me. Like cauterization is painful, but damn, is that wound going to be clean afterwards, and it's going to heal really well. That's what it feels like. So I guess it's bhakti, I think, and it's also a relief to hear you say that you've been studying this and absorbing it for 7 years, because this is like emotionally, it is so much, and it's so much guidance, but it feels like, I think I sent you that email, like it feels like a technical manual to being a human, and a really great guide for me to start this journey with. I've only been doing yoga for, I don't know, 1.5 years or so, but I think it's working for me.
Love that. The technical guide for being a human. I think I might have to use that.
You take it. You take it.
I'm curious about what you said about bhakti. You feel like you're experiencing bhakti as you're working through these samskaras. Can you say more
Yeah.
about that?
Let me find my notes. Bhakti. Where is Bhakti? I have a lot of notes. Um, the yoga of devotion. That's it. The heart-centered yoga. That's what I feel is opening up in my heart as I go through those really difficult, scary emotions, like the connection. It's like I'm sensing the samskara underneath. I can feel the trauma pattern down there, and memories are arising, and I'm looking at them and remembering them fully and not flinching away from them or closing them down, kind of like I have before, just letting them go and be and go through me. And then it feels like my heart opens. And when you started teaching the first day, you quoted Nishala saying that like yoga is what is it, the art of devotion. And that's what it feels like. It feels like just like this is a path that we revere and we seek because it gives us this incredible opening into a peace that only lives inside of ourselves. So that feels like, I don't know, feels like heart-centered to me. It's like this ultimate form of
Absolutely.
self-love that I've never felt in my life.
What's beautiful about that is that what you're describing is the nature of God itself, or Ishvara, that openness, that heart-centeredness. So as you're moving through your samskara, you're discovering all on your own simultaneously. Without that obstruction there, you're able to feel more fully the presence of spirit in your body, in your heart. That
Yeah.
then the nature of that spirit is that openness. Yeah. So
Yes.
we're getting rid of those constricted, dense energies and allowing that spaciousness to expand.
Yeah.
So
And
beautiful.
it's really, I think it's maybe something that you almost can't describe to another person without without the language of the sutras. It's like I've been trying to understand what I have been experiencing since I took your somatic class, a year ago, I don't even remember how long ago it was. You did a nidra for us, and I had this moment, and I was like, whoa, what was that? I want me some more of that. And I've been maybe that's that longing that you talked about. I've been longing for that and seeking that experience ever since. And my experience has been that as I practiced, I have grown stronger at finding that. And it's just
Yeah,
this
created a
it's amazing.
pathway. The more you walk on that pathway, the more defined and easy it is.
Yeah, so thank you,
Beautiful.
Jeanette.
Thank you, Robin. I'm going to close this out with another mantra. This is the Purna mantra, and it's exclaiming that this is full, that is full. The nature of the universe itself is fullness, and I flow from the universe, and therefore, when full, What flows forth from fullness is fullness. I am whole and complete exactly as I am. And you are. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May our healing lead to healing for all others who need it. And may all people on this planet have access to clean water, healthy food, adequate shelter, medical care, education, and safety, because every person deserves these things just as much as I do. I bow to the light in you because it's the same as the light in me. Namaste.
Namaste, Jeanette.
Thank you, Robin.